All right, the October 20th meeting of the Rockport School Committee is now in session. This meeting is being recorded. We're in the school library for this week only, but then we'll return to our new normal, our new home in the town library. First item, first action is the approval of minutes from October 5th. Colleen, you weren't here, so you won't be voting on it. Does anyone have any corrections or amendments or additions they'd like to make?
No.
Okay. So we have a motion to approve the meeting's minutes from 10:05.
So moved. Second.
All those in favor?
Aye.
Public comment, we don't have a public tonight, so correct. So we'll move on to correspondence. So there's a letter in the drive, which I think you've all seen. I think Superintendent Branco is going to give us an overview of it from Chief Horvath regarding a new initiative he'd like to support us in.
Yep, thank you, Mr. Chair. So the chief called me a couple of weeks ago or more, had a nice conversation with me about this program that AAA is supporting called the School Safety Patrol Program. I believe part of the reason he was looking into this is he and I have heard, as well as the principals, from multiple community members about concerns around traffic within the campus area and around the neighborhoods where our kids are walking to school. With a lot of kids walking to school, riding to school, getting dropped off in certain areas, and then walking a little bit. And I just think there was an uptick in the belief that people are speeding or not driving as appropriately as they should through certain areas of the neighborhoods close to the school and around the campus. So at times we've had extra officers. If you've been by the campus recently, you'll see the big beautiful sign, the digital sign that tells you how fast you're driving now. So we've tried to take some preventative measures. But this is a proactive leadership measure that looks pretty cool, where they will work with us to identify student leaders. We haven't decided on what grade levels yet. We're going to, hopefully with your blessing in a couple of weeks, we'll move forward and figure that out. But some level of student leadership that's interested in basically being on this safety patrol program. And they would literally be crosswalked up, so to speak, with the vests and stuff. This does not put students in the middle of the crosswalk with a stop sign. This puts them in strategic locations to be student leaders, to tell young students or families, oh, now it's clear, let's wait here, to just sort of be visible community leaders to help with this issue that we believe we're having right now. It does give another layer of community involvement. It provides some leadership opportunities for students looking for that level of leadership. So it looks, it's pretty thorough, looks like a pretty cool program. Have no idea what the interest level will be for the students, but the hope here is we put it in here, you all talk about it between now and the next meeting, and then if we come back to the next meeting and you green light it, then the chief and I will work out the logistics with the principals.
Did Chief Horvath mention whether there are any other communities that have this program locally on Cape Ann?
No, that's a great question. I can follow up with him and ask that. That's actually a really great question.
I don't know if I've ever seen one locally,
Right.
but it sounds like it's fairly popular in other areas. And it sounds too like it's more like a belt and suspenders approach, where they're not providing any guidance to the traffic whipping around the corner.
No,
it's
not
just
at
an
all.
extra set of hands to prevent the
It's really another set of eyes and ears.
Yeah.
If a 7-year-old and another 7-year-old are distracted walking, which could happen with 7-year-olds or 10-year-olds or 15-year-olds, it's just another set of eyes and ears to just keep everybody safe.
Do you have any idea if Chief's identified some of those other locations that might be problem areas where he's hoping to maybe put?
Yeah, I believe he has.
Yeah.
So I think once we feel like we have your support, I think then he'll start to map it out so that when we look for volunteers and try to explain what this looks like to students and families, there'll be target zones.
Right.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Can I ask, so I understand how it would work in the afternoon because the high school and middle school get out earlier, but
Yeah.
how would it work in the morning if the
That's
kids are already in school?
Honestly, it's a great question. I don't know yet. Yeah. He clearly had it articulated in his head, so
Yeah.
I'm not sure. I think moving forward in a year 2 phase, we have a lot of kids that will do community service or will do different project-based stuff that they go out into the community, particularly seniors. And I suppose it could be some juniors that have those extended opportunities. So it could be some kind of extended opportunity
Yeah.
to those kids to get out for the elementary students. Yeah.
Maybe it's 5th graders.
Right. Yeah.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah, it absolutely could be. Yeah.
And this keeps the crossing guards at the two main
Oh, yeah.
spots,
Yeah.
the main spots where they are.
Yeah.
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 Kind of.
I also think of drivers seeing those extra
Yep.
students.
Right.
They're
Seeing
more
the
visible.
patrol,
Yeah.
thinking like,
Yeah.
oh, there's a police officer here, I'm seeing these students in safety patrol, so it's one more cue also for drivers to be watching those areas.
We're just not, we're not always thinking about it. People are in a hurry and,
Yeah.
it's not malicious intent, it's just,
Right.
it's the world we're living in
Trying
right now.
to-
Yeah.
You do see, anecdotally, I'm going to say this because I think we've all seen it, I know I see it a lot. The moment a child is dropped off by a parent, many of those parents now want to get the heck out of Dodge, and suddenly it's a lot less polite, there's no waving of people along, so the additional police presence, it's actually been nice in terms of trying to model behavior for the parents dropping kids off, because you're right, people aren't thinking and kids are crossing from every side, and sometimes they're panicking because it's 7:34 and they need to hustle across the tarmac as fast as possible. So it'll be interesting to see how much kid interest is generated from the proposal.
And we've got administrators out in front of the buildings.
Yep.
We're taking turns getting out there with different staff members, so I think that just upping the presence and the support, just to send the community message, look, we don't need to slow down this 15-minute period of time in the morning.
It would be interesting too, I'm just going to throw this out as well, I don't know if Chief Horvath was taking a look at this, but I've noticed too, like the crescent as you pull in to drop kids off, people pull in, and then when they make a left-hand turn, it increases the complexity. And I wonder if Chief Horvath would consider doing something like saying, when you exit between these hours, you must take a right, because then the traffic flow would be in and out, not in and then back around. Yeah. So I don't know what the ramifications of that, though, are for the neighborhood, but I see that as a real congestion point when people try and take that left to go back down Summer Street,
Yep.
cutting off the parents pulling in. Just a thought.
I'm just gonna remind everybody that we don't have microphones tonight because of where we are, so we're gonna make sure our voices are way up. To the best of our ability.
Right. We switched it up on you tonight. We moved our location, but we'll be back at the library.
I
next
saw
week.
that, and I only looked at it the last minute. I printed out the agenda.
All right, so I guess we'll review the materials that we have,
Yep.
have a conversation about it, and it's great to see Chief Horvath being proactive and suggesting things that might make it a little bit safer, a little bit better for people dropping students off. So personnel items, looks like we have 2 items.
Yep, we have Amy Poole resigning from her position as an elementary school monitor, and Josh Hunt resigned from his position as a middle school paraprofessional. We wish them both luck in future endeavors, and thank you for supporting Rockport students.
Great. Next item is the Student Advisory Committee rep share the success moment, but I wanted to point out one of the reasons we moved the meeting from last night to tonight was a presentation of the Coral Summit that Josh was a part of, and Josh, it's always so moving and so impressive because it has every grade level of student in there performing, or at least every school, elementary, middle, and high, and it shows the progression, and with the guest conductor, it was just amazing. It's always like a highlight of the year to hear that. So with that intro, I'll turn it over to you.
Well, thank you very much for that. We always, all the students very much enjoy the clinicians both, and getting the opportunity to meet with the younger generations and really see where we've come from. All right, so we're going to start at the elementary school, which mentions, just as you said, the concerts that have been going on, and there will be more soon. There will be an orchestra summit and a band summit, and then we'll have winter concerts after that. The PTO organized a trunk or treat for next week, which I'm not sure what that is, but it sounds fun.
Decorate your trunk and then people give out candy.
Okay.
Kind of like trick or treating from your car.
I see.
When's that?
Yeah, it sounds fun. Grades 1 through 5, they'll be dressing up for the Halloween walk to Denmark, where they'll be meeting with the older members of the population. I remember doing that as a kid. It was very much, it was a lot of fun. It was a good day out of school. Grades 1 through 5 teachers are doing professional development from Landmark on writing so that they can implement new structures to improve ELA education. And I know this has been an area that the school committee has been focusing on. So that's really great. And they have a theme this year called Leaders Are Readers, where Endicott students will come in to read to the youngest grades over the next few weeks, and they'll leave some books in the classroom for them to enjoy. They'll also have First R come in this year, beginning next week, to read to the younger students and donate books as well. So another area where they're increasing literacy among younger students. And then we can go to the middle school. So I'll skip the chorus part, but yes, it's present in all of them. In the 8th grade, in the arts and science special blocks, students were making batikas, and that's a method of dyeing textiles for artistic creations. And they do that by extracting pigment from local paints, and it's being co-taught by the 8th grade science teacher, Miss Crocker, and the art teacher, Miss Jones. So the students are doing a great job on their programs, their projects. The cast list has been posted for the musical, Mary Poppins, and they have 24 students involved, which is a huge amount for a musical, so that's wonderful. On Wednesday morning, the first block assembly was postponed because they had a musical guest call in ill, but instead of the concert, they did a whole school outdoor exercise period walking the track, which I'm sure all the students very much enjoyed. And Kestrel is continuing to support the middle school in their science curriculum, getting some more hands-on activity. Then at the high school, all the juniors participated in the PSATs, which was, so fun. The seniors went into the community and for seniors helping seniors projects where they got experience, they got community service hours and experience helping people in the community. There was the choral festival. The staff members from Gloucester's Biotech Academy came in to the biology and other STEM classes, and they extracted DNA and discussed practical lab skills. The golf team participated in their first round of the state tournament, which I know the golf team is always very good. The senior soccer games are coming up on Saturday at 9 and 11 on the Ryan Curley Field. And the fall musical is about to debut at the end of October. And I can get the dates for that, but I'm sure they'll be sent out at some point. They're doing Little Shop of Horrors, and it sounds great. I heard their rehearsals, so yeah.
If you don't mind me jumping in, I happened to be doing walkthroughs the day some of the things Josh is talking about were happening. So that 6th grade interdisciplinary work between the art teacher and the science teacher is unbelievable to watch. They're out there literally picking berries and plants, and they're turning them into dyes and liquids, and then they're taking the tapestries and the cloth, and then they're making art with those. So just to talk that through from the creation standpoint all the way is fascinating to watch. And then in the science class with the high school, to watch the DNA and to watch just all these kids just popping and waiting to watch the DNA separate in the tubes, and just really, really cool that I happened to walk through on that particular day and see really good, solid hands-on learning experiences. So kudos to those teachers for really being creative and out of the box with some of what they're doing. And the partnership with the programs in Gloucester is duly noted as well.
Nice.
I think, Josh, I don't know if you remember much from the kindergarten parade, but I think coming up here to watch that year after year when I had kids in elementary school, it is one of the sweetest small town moments you can imagine, where the fire department is shutting off the roads so they can get up there. The kids are in costume, the older kids are cheering the little kids on. It's so supportive, but the thing that really provided shock and awe is one year as we marched into Denmark, many of the residents, unknowns to the kids coming in, are also dressed up. And I remember one year in particular where there was a woman in a theatrical grade Rockettes costume. At some point she was on the stage and she had her costume, and the kids were flabbergasted because they were not expecting this. So it's just a really sweet moment. I haven't been in a few years, but you haven't seen it yet,
No,
Mark.
can't wait.
It's very special. Very special.
I know also that recently some chamber music kids performed a string quartet for them at Denmark too.
Nice.
So,
Nice, very
yeah.
nice.
Nice. That's
Can I
great.
share another quick success? This afternoon, the middle school field hockey team played their last game, and they played out on the high school field, the big field, and the excitement was just through the roof. It was awesome. There was about 30 middle school kids or so on the team, and there were so many parents who came, so many teachers who came out to support the kids
That's
playing.
so great.
That music playing. It was just a
The
really fun
scoreboard, they were really
atmosphere.
excited.
And
Oh, there's.
for those kids at the middle school level to experience that, and the high school field hockey team was there waiting for their game afterwards, so they were watching the middle schoolers play. It was just a really great atmosphere to see the two levels together. Yeah.
And you reminded me, Mark, and this was something that Josh saw last night, during the Choral Summit, we have a math teacher, Mr. Lonsby, who's an incredibly accomplished pianist. And it's like you're watching this performance, and the kids are just amazing, the guest conductor is amazing. But it's also a reminder that the talent base of our teaching staff spans outside of their discipline for sure. And the fact that that's extra time with someone who has a young child, I was just very impressed about the community feel of that evening. So, subcommittee updates. I don't believe there are any at this time. So to come, unfinished business, we have our standing entry for
So we're plugging away. We're up to 138 respondents. That's about 10 more. So I feel like it's about 10 or 15 trickle in a week. So we're getting there. Though I was hoping for 200, so we're getting close. I have also started the one-on-one interviews with the targeted stakeholders. So we've had school committee members in. We've had Board of Selectmen in. I have half the FinCom scheduled already to come in, and then I think some of you are scheduled to come in as well soon. So those are moving along, and then I'm putting together the focus groups, which will follow the one-on-ones. And the administrative team and I are deeply in the middle of the data and document review at this time, which is going to be ongoing. So surprisingly on target for March right now, so I say out loud. But we'll see what happens once budget season kicks in, I would suspect.
So, how many school committee members have signed up for an interview? He said, having signed up for one a few moments ago.
I've completed it, so.
Hasn't been completed.
Okay,
Completed.
you're completed.
2 done, 3 to go, right?
Excellent. Look at us go. Capital Improvement Planning Committee, it's time for the request to go in.
So I just include the cover letter for you that kind of highlights the asks, so to speak. June's not here tonight. She's actually at her organization's conference. The fall conference for MASBO is happening right now. So I do want to publicly thank her. She did a heavy lift. The admin team came together. We did walkthroughs of the facilities with administrative team as well as Kirk. Looked at I went through every single classroom with the principals to take a look at the environment and the learning environments, everything from shades to carpeting to floors to desks. Some of those things that I think over time we just haven't given enough attention to, so to speak. So we did a lot of walkthroughs and put it all together, and June kind of pulled all that data together to put the report together for the team. So we're really looking at replacement of outdated furniture, particularly in middle school science classrooms. We would like to fully outfit the middle school, high school STEM and engineering labs, which really are engineering labs, but in name only. Those are just physical spaces that used to be what we used to call, when I was a child 100 years ago, the industrial arts rooms, right? So we really want to move those rooms forward. It's difficult to start to develop curriculum and programming when you don't have the facilities correct. So we're looking for that kind of upgrade there. If you've walked through the elementary school at all, they do not build elementary schools with carpet anymore, for a lot of reasons that you can imagine. So we'll just leave it to your imagination on that one. But the entire elementary school has either what's called half carpet, half the room is carpeted, half the room is tiled, or they have the 1/3, 2/3 model, depending whether you're upstairs or downstairs. It's really got to go. It's from a health standpoint, from a usability standpoint, from an aesthetic standpoint, and a little bit from an educational standpoint in a lot of ways too. So we're looking at overhauling the elementary school in a certain priority order, so to speak, to get to tile flooring in all of those rooms. And then we're also looking at replacement window shades in all pre-K to 12 classrooms. We just finished our Safety Alice training recently on our full professional development day, and we walked through with the fire department and the police department, and it's almost difficult in some spaces to go with the blinds down. Some of them I would suspect are the original window treatments in these buildings. So we're getting quotes for full overhauls, pre-K to 12 for replacements. And ultimately, some of the bigger asks are our tractor is nearing its end of life, and we do partner with the town heavily, particularly in the winter, to keep the schools and parking lots open, and without that tractor we could be in serious trouble. And our pickup truck is starting to I guess I'm not a great car guy, but rust from the bottom, which is not good. So we're going to be in a situation where we're going to need the new pickup truck soon. And we've also looked at upgrading the interior lights in the middle school. So if you walk to the middle school and high school, there was must have been some electrical grant, some green initiative that the town participated in 2, 3, 4 years ago maybe, where all of the upstairs part of the high school was taken care of. So if you walk in right now, really bright and welcoming upstairs, and when you go into the middle school, the downstairs, totally different. So we've talked about that from a safety and security standpoint, from a social emotional standpoint. It's really not the basement of the school, it's actually the entry floor level, but it feels like you're in the bellows of the building so we've gotten quotes for the upgrades and the lighting as well. So
Could I ask a question?
you can.
Is that something that the Green Community Task Force for the town
I-
could partner on with grants?
So, yeah, so when you put in the capital improvement planning request, some of the questions, just like other grant organizations are, do have other funding sources, alternative funding sources, so that we're just at phase 1 of the ask. So as we participate on this, they will start to talk about other options within the community.
Right.
I think it just depends if those grants are available, if the state's kicking in any money for that right now. And remember that this is a 5-year capital plan, so not everything that I just talked about is in year 1 proposal. We actually have rank ordered everything, send that off to town hall. Town administrator will look at it, then he'll invite me back to look at it again with him once he's looked at it, and then it moves forward to the full committee, who will decide to what level. One of the other big asks on there is to take a look at our preschool playground. And we have got a quote for a full replacement, not just a new fence or not just a few little upgrades, but a full replacement of that preschool playground. And in that case, it's absolutely a community piece of equipment. And so we would be looking to partner with different factions of the community on that project.
So the rank order and the cost per item is something that we've typically had at these presentations?
Yep.
Is that something June can provide us?
Yeah, it's in a really large PDF. I'd be happy, when she's back, I'll be happy to drop that in the drive for you.
Awesome.
And I can put it in the drive for this meeting if that way you know where it is.
Yeah.
Does that work? Yep.
Because often in the past too, I mean, there's a lot of horse trading in terms of how much money the town
Right.
has, what
Yeah.
portion the school gets, but
Yeah.
also we give them the wish list, and if it doesn't make it this year, sometimes they spread the cost, it costs 3 years, so
Right,
it'd be good to know.
Yep, I'll make sure she puts that in for you as soon as she's back.
Excellent. All right, so we're moving on. Questions for that, sorry. Sounds good. Transportation update, so this is new business.
So you have a report in there based on the fluidity of our transportation situation. I wanted to make sure it was all buttoned up before I gave you anything. And it literally got buttoned up today when a brand new bus got delivered to the town.
Today.
Nice.
Today, which is fascinating timing, right? So that's why you'll see that it probably doesn't even say that on here. So I won't read the whole thing through to you, but just, I stepped you through a very high-level update on the bus accident to the extent that I'm allowed to document it for you. I wanted you to know, and the community to know, we've communicated to parents, particularly the elementary school, but we wanted you to know the transportation impact, that, as a result, we are down to 2 operating buses with 2 drivers. Very difficult to find subs. We have a couple local drivers who have been fantastic. We have really begged people to keep their licenses, literally to keep a license and to keep bailing us out. And thank you to those community members who have said yes, because without them, I think we would have been in a much worse situation for a short period of time. This really didn't impact the middle school, high school student schedule too much. So many kids stay after school for athletics, clubs, activities, and other things, or are just old enough to get home by other means. But at the elementary school, we did wind up with a small group of students that would stay back, and the staff would keep them attended, and then the bus would return to pick up that second run. So we were running a second run, and we will be doing that until the new bus is up with all its inspection stickers and state identifications. Athletic department relied heavily on the activities buses. They chartered some private buses, had some parent volunteers who were fantastic, and public thanks to the Gloucester Public Schools. Every time John called in a pinch, they stepped up, sent the bus our way. Really, really, really nice. So thank you to them for bailing us out in our time of need. So prior to the accident, we had 4 buses, one of which was a 2009 model. That was out a lot. That's what we call bus 4. So bus 4 has been out more than it's been in. That is part of the trade-in, just like when you trade in your car, we did the same with the bus, if you remember. So the new bus is coming in, bus 4 goes out. And I wrote as early as Thursday the 20th, and happy to report that that bus is physically here. One of our drivers has, I believe, taken the bus, and it's gonna be soon. You're shaking at me.
The new bus or the old bus?
The new one.
The new bus, the registration is in process. and
Awesome.
All of the stuff has gone to the registry and the insurance company. We have an appointment with the DOT to get it inspected, I think next week,
Yeah.
early next week, I
Yeah.
think maybe Monday.
Yeah,
And then they'll do a state inspection, and then it'll be road ready.
awesome. So very soon, and people are chomping at the bit. I don't know if they're flipping a coin or how they're gonna, I don't know how they're gonna decide who gets to drive who drives the new bus. I don't know if they're arm wrestling for the bus, I'm not sure. So that puts us in a much better situation. So we will be putting an ad out shortly for, in a variety of places, on our Facebook page, through the websites, through the Gloucester Times most likely, looking for drivers. It's very difficult. Everybody's reporting the same thing in my group, that it's very difficult. And we will most likely offer to support, if it's someone who doesn't have a license, who is looking for a career change and willing to take this on, we will most likely offer to support that person in their
A
efforts
bus license.
to get a bus license.
Right.
Yes. No. Any thoughts, questions about the
Concerns?
transportation
Rob
updates?
when you need him.
Right?
I mean, he
What's he
was
doing?
going.
He did text immediately, sorry about the bus, so, you know, he knew. He clearly knew it happened.
Well, I'm glad it sounds like the bus driver himself was also not.
He is, so,
Hurt.
he is, he's in better state now, and we're hoping that he recovers quickly and all goes well with him. Yeah.
Great. Well, thank you for the detailed report. That's great. MCAS results overview presentation.
So I'm gonna switch decks on you, and this deck will be on the website tomorrow for the community. But clearly wanted to give you first crack at the information. It's probably not in that, because it literally was updated this morning
Okay.
with new numbers. So we have been, and so it's gonna be up on the screen for us here. So we have been in data review mode since the information has come out. So just a quick overview and reminder that we switched to the next generation achievement tests a little while back, pre-COVID, so that if you had older students come through this, the identification system is different. So we now have exceeding expectations, meeting expectations, partially meeting, and not meeting.
What was it beforehand?
Failing, Mark, you had to ask.
What was your question, Jeff?
Or what was
The
the
old
system
ones.
beforehand?
Advanced proficient,
It's like an SP.
SP,
Is
and
the,
then.
is the only difference like how they're scored?
It's scoring, and it's more tied directly to the framework, to the expectations of the state. Whereas,
makes sense.
yeah,
Yeah.
so this is, it's more, it's more tied to a standards-based report card model with more verbiage that's easier to understand for non-educators,
Yeah.
and theoretically easier to understand to parents and to kids, so that they can use plain language to tell you how you're doing and what you have to work on. So,
That makes
yeah,
sense.
it was a nice shift. So, just a quick overview, if you're not a parent of a child taking MCAS anymore, the parents get a pretty detailed report. I know mine just took his very last one. So they get a pretty detailed report that goes out, shows where your child is on the spectrum of not meeting expectations all the way up. Also talks about the growth report, which we will talk about a little later in this presentation, and it gives you an item analysis in each subject area as well, so you can see the strengths and weaknesses of your child. So the parent gets a pretty good amount of detail. The teacher detail clearly goes deeper, but as a parent who gets the reports, I'm pleasantly surprised by the amount of detail that we do get here. I have encouraged families to reach out to teachers and administrators with questions about the report. Absolutely, we want to make sure people understand what they mean and what the impact is, and how we're going to use the data. So if you have concerns about anything that you see in the report, please make sure you reach out to either the child's teacher or the administrator at the school. So we have a shift in graduation requirements that continues to happen over time. We talked about this at our last meeting, that incoming students are going to have even tougher requirements, but right now, they have to earn a score of 472 for the class of 24 and 25. In math, it's 486. That is the old 220 legacy STE test, which is interesting that they're still using interim passing standard language. They actually have the new test. Our students did take the new exam this past year for the first time. And DESE has not, this is their public report, DESE has not put out the public number, interestingly enough. I think they're trying to create like a sliding scale almost until they calibrate it. And then option 2, just is for students who might struggle with this kind of a test. There's always an option for the educational proficiency plan in math and English language arts that the schools have some control over supporting those students towards the graduation requirement. A lot of debate around connecting standardized testing to the graduation requirement. Clearly not the only state that does that, but it's there, so we're trying to be appropriate with that data. Tough to read this, so it would make more sense when you get it in your folder. But this I just wanted to include this so you understood the changes in the science test. So we went from the legacy to the next gen, and then what's happening is this biology and introductory physics are now in the new test for February and June, and chemistry and tech engineering are phasing out. Let me rephrase that, a high percentage of students across the Commonwealth were not taking advantage of the chemistry and the tech engineering test. My professional opinion on this is that it's because it's a high stakes test. So because we connect it to graduation requirements, and because people know that sometimes this impacts scholarships and other things like that, I think people were challenging themselves to take that test. And so I guess I can understand that logic. So they're phasing this out, and that test after last year will not be given anymore. I believe it's the last time it will be taken in 2023. So right now here we have our freshmen take the bio test, and then our sophomores take the other 2 tests. Just a reminder that we have 12 different subgroups that impact accountability. So even though we have a reprieve from accountability, that does not mean we don't have the data. I think that's important to acknowledge here. So we have all of the data. What I did for you on this slide is I showed you not only the subgroups, but I wanted to show you our actual local context. So you'll see that that's the 3 through 8 number and then the high school number. Just so that when we talk about equity and diversity and access, and how we're meeting the needs of all, meaning all, we get a good picture of who our students are and where they come from, at least in regards to DESE's identified subgroups. In order to report data for a subgroup formally, they state that the results have to be for at least 20 students. So that's for public information. However, internally, we actually have the ability to click and to get that information for the students by name. And by category, even if it's under 20, they just won't disseminate that publicly for a lot of good reasons. And then in the really, really small print, you'll see when you take a look at this on your free time, that they have redefined the low income and economically disadvantaged subgroup and made it a little easier for us to tease out. And so those subgroups that we're really looking at right now, high needs, low income, and students with disabilities, those are the major focus areas right now. Where we're going to look at discrepancies in skill sets and achievement levels. Questions about subgroups?
That's not an insignificant number when you look at high needs as a function of total.
Yeah, and that's why I've said in multiple meetings so far that we've had in the district, we have to be careful with percentages in a small town. Right? So we are small enough that we can actually use real numbers. So we can talk about N. And in a big district, when you talk percentages, that's pretty impactful. But with 67 high schoolers taking a test, 10% is 10%. That's still 6 kids by name that could potentially really need some serious help if that's the case. So we're having conversations about N versus percentages, in-house at least. So you have the results summary in the deck. What I've done is I chunked it for the slides, and then I really want to slow down on this section. This is where the important data is. So this is a format that I've used in the past. I'd like to thank Jody Goodhue, who I leaned on a little bit to help put some of the data together for me. We pulled every single report that we wanted to. We put them into subfolders for all staff members. They have been shared out with the curriculum leaders at this point, and all teachers have access to all of the data. So we're diving into it, and I do know, and I'll get to this a little later, but I do know that curriculum team leaders have already run department meetings and started to dig into the data for students by name to figure out where we need to support kids. So this is high-level numbers, but there is a lot of information to glean from this. So I'm going to jump right to each schools, because that's really the bulk of the work we're doing. Because if you address the problems at the school level with kids by name, the district data takes care of itself. So when you look at the elementary school, and I want to go grade by grade, and then instead of me talking the whole time, what I'll do is I'll take a pause. I think it might be safer just to say, let's talk about what I have to say, and then you give me your thoughts back.
Right.
If you're okay with a fluid conversation, that might be the best way to do it. So I take third grade as a first-time MCAS baseline. That's how we've talked about it. This is a group of kids who've never taken the standardized test before. This is our first opportunity with this particular group of students to get a feel for where they fall according to what the state's expectations are. It is also the first time they've really taken this kind of test. So there's a lot of variables in there. So we're attacking third grade every year that we have third graders as a first-time baseline. With that said, it's 2022. These kids really didn't have a legitimate school year ever since they entered our school. Maybe preschoolers did, but generally speaking, last year was the first thing closest to a real school year that these children of this age bracket have ever had. So that's a lot of ground to make up. So we're looking at 54% partially meeting as less problematic in third grade than it will be when we talk about it in other grades, if that makes sense. And if you've noticed the way we've laid this report out with this school to state differential, what I'm really looking for is I'm looking to see pluses in the exceeds and meetings, and I'm looking to see negative numbers in the partially and not meetings, right? You want to be well above the state in a community like Rockport in those upper level exceedings and meetings, and the hope is you're below the state numbers in partially meeting and not meeting. That is not the case in that third grade ELA in math, but the interesting news there is as the teachers start to dig down into kids by name, we're going to identify how many kids are close. It could be that 10 kids are one question away or 2 questions away, and it might be that we have other kids that are 2 questions away from going in the other direction. So that's the nitty-gritty that teachers are doing for us right now, to be able to identify who just needs a little support to cross achievement levels, and who are we looking out for because we can't have them slip. So I would suspect moving forward that partially meeting percentage would uptick pretty quickly the hope is within a year, is how we've talked about 3rd to 4th grade. We also have iReady in the math program, really good math program. It's structured, it aligns nicely with the state frameworks, and it has assessments built in that will help us be able to track and correlate our data between state data and local data as well. And we do not have student growth model in 3rd grade because that's the first year that they took it. So questions or thoughts about 3rd grade before I move?
So I have one observation, and you guys can shout me down if you disagree. I find it's very difficult to picture trends year over year in this sort of a format, and I'm really wondering, because in prior years, whether it's been by the state or by school resources, to have something, just a chart that has grade, year, Rockport performance by subject matter versus state performance, because then you get sort of a total picture of, are we trending in general above or below what the state is doing? I would find that to be really helpful. I know this is our first blush.
So we've been asked to not use the bar graphs and to not use the bar lines this year because we've been told to not relate the data to past years because of the pandemic. That it is we've been told that it's unreasonable to compare Johnny in 6th grade to where he was in 3rd grade because then he didn't take it for 2 years. That's why the state language is that this is a reset year. You will see, starting with next year, you'll see the year-to-year achievement data, you'll see the growth chart. So I will tell you, we have access to them all.
Right.
But we've been told from a data collection standpoint, that we want to focus on the reset, we want to focus on acceleration, and we want to focus on moving the data point from this year to next year.
I guess what I'm saying is, I'm not concerned about Johnny, I'm concerned about a larger level
Yeah.
of view where all of the kids in Massachusetts had that same scenario.
True.
So just
Yeah.
how is Rockport doing versus the state would
Yeah.
be one way to look at this.
Yeah.
I just find it very difficult to get a vibe across grade levels and across subject matters when it's expressed like this, and I don't know, you guys.
As opposed to the plus and the minuses, which is just a bar graph turned into
Yeah.
numbers.
Yeah, because I think in terms of visual
Yep.
information,
Yep.
it's a better way, I think, to observe how we're doing versus the
So I'd
trends.
be happy to turn this into that, so you have both documents.
I-
Would that be helpful?
Do you guys, would you find that helpful, or?
I mean,
just-
I also had
okay.
that thought when you brought it up, so, yeah.
I mean, I could see that you can, this actually forces me to look at it a little bit more in depth.
Yeah.
But
Okay.
I'm maybe not grasping the trend that I would be able to grasp from a visual display of the information. So I can see it both ways,
I
definitely.
mean, part of what I'm trying to get to is
How-
year over year, COVID, return from COVID, full return.
Mhm.
How are we doing versus the rest of the state? I would imagine in COVID years, everybody is struggling. But
Mhm.
if we're disproportionately struggling from the state, then that tells us something about our own environment that maybe requires,
Mhm.
So this tells me we are until 5th grade.
Correct.
yeah.
Right.
Okay,
Correct.
With the
maybe
plus
just
and
be
minus.
me.
Yeah,
The
that
plus
is the
and
plus and
minuses
minus.
work for me.
Yeah, yeah. And I don't mind doing it both ways. What we've been encouraged to not do is to not show the year-over-year impact from when, from, if a set, where a
Like before COVID.
seventh grader compared to their last time that they
Sure.
really took this test. But this, if you want the comparison state to state, town to town, state to town against state, other than with the negatives and the positives, that's probably an easy data pull.
And you do have student growth profiles in here, so that
I
is
do.
not relative to their earlier tests?
Yeah, we'll talk about it. It is.
Okay.
Yeah, it
Okay.
is. Yeah, they've quantified it, and when I come to that slide, you'll see it, but basically the shorthand version of this is they used 10% from the 2019 test and 20% from the 2022 test. They did some mathematical
Interesting.
equation, they put more stock in this test because this was the new one. So they did, yeah, somehow they have a conglomeration of 2019 data and 2022 data to roughly tell you the growth. The growth will be way more meaningful next year. I mean, it's almost inarguable, because this was the first year in a long time that they've taken the test the same way. So when you come to 4th grade, we do see some really alarming data in the English Language Arts department with 60% partially meeting and 20% not meeting. That has, in my understanding, is not surprising, and I know that's not a healthy way to phrase that, that's just the best way I can phrase it right now. But we have started landmark writing programming, and we will be looking at our English Language Arts curriculum review cycle. That will be the first content area that will happen while I'm here, to make sure we're looking at structured materials, to make sure we have the right professional development in place. And I believe that the current administration, both of whom have been here, just weren't in these roles, are well aware that writing had been a problem. And so when our department leaders have teased out that 80%, a good percentage of the struggle is in the area of writing. And so that's the attack. So when we get to the next steps and what we will be working on, that's the big ticket item at the elementary school, is really digging into our writing curriculum. You'll see on the other side of that, the exact same group of students, 56% growth. That is a very large percentage in the growth. Anything above 40 to 50 is considered high. High growth is well above 50 to 100. And 6 above the state in math is while it's not double digits yet, that tells me with the iReady math program and with us putting a good amount of effort into math, you do see the results. So I can surmise that when we put the same amount of time and effort into English Language Arts, particularly into writing, we should see the same results. So while you see 40% partially meeting and 15% not meeting, 56% growth is large growth. So we didn't move the achievement line necessarily for all students yet, But if growth continues to be above 50%, then the achievement line moves. So I would predict that that will continue to be a trend in the 4th grade. And you see the exact same trend if I jump to 5th grade. You also see, not as high a number, but you see a similar writing trend there too, with 63% and 5%. But then you see, again, a 56% growth in math. So we have some celebrations at the elementary school, particularly around math growth. That is no small feat. So I've said this publicly many times, a majority of the focus of elementary school teachers is around literacy. Many elementary school teachers have a background in literacy. They were reading specialists. Many of them don't have a formal math degree because that's not the track you go when you become an elementary teacher. So we throw a lot more support from a professional development standpoint and resources in the math department, and you actually can see the results.
Yeah.
So now we have to make the same thing happen, particularly in writing.
And also spotlight on that science.
Thank you. I have it here, and I just took a breath. Yes, on 66% exceeding in meeting, and again, first time.
Plus 12, plus 11.
Right, and it's the first time that they take the test. So while they've taken an MCAS in 3rd and 4th grade, they've never taken a science MCAS. So that science MCAS is for the very first time, and I give credit to all teachers because that's a cumulative exam, right? I mean, I always give credit to all teachers who have the students, but really in science, it's on the back of the 1st, 2nd, 3rd, 4th, 5th grade teachers every year. But really in science, it's the first time we have any data on these kids by name. So thank you.
And talk about not having specialized in science. We've always heard that the elementary teachers are intimidated by science, and this is them flipping that.
And I believe, and nobody's here to back me up, but I think somebody here could probably tell me if I'm wrong. I believe there was a movement towards FOSS recently too. So I do believe there was an investment and some training around new science materials within the past potentially 3 or 4 years. And so all it tells me as a curriculum leader is what I knew coming in, but I'd like to see it on the page. When you address teaching and learning through professional development and through the right access to resources, it'll happen. Now we have to do it in English language arts at the elementary school.
And is the writing, this has been sort of a known that there has not been a cohesive writing curriculum in elementary school.
Yep.
It's been a whole, and so is that being addressed? Is that like a this year thing?
Yes, it's happening right now. We've partnered with Landmark, and they're going to come to you soon with a presentation on the Landmark model and on what I told them that I wanted to do this first. And then they're going to come in, both Jody and Amy will come together, maybe with some reading people as well, and really give it a pretty decent little presentation to all of us on the purpose and who we're partnering with and what the intended outcomes will be. Yeah.
I have a question. So as the grade levels go up here in the English language arts, it appears that like the student scores tend to decrease. And my question is, do you think that's related to a trend that appeared over COVID and like is a COVID related result that will go away? Or do you think that's something that's more descriptive of like compounding issues in those areas?
I don't think there's one answer to that. I think to Chairman Kelly's point, the whole state is down when you look at comparative growth models particularly. And even towns that are celebrating closing the achievement gap, you have to be careful. That's why I'm not talking about that tonight. I'll talk about it broadly, but not with us. You can close an achievement gap when your top performers go down.
Yeah.
And if you're a numbers person and you're more quantitative than qualitative, that's why I value both, you can be tricked into thinking the achievement gap closed in a positive way.
Yeah.
So I think COVID has happened and it has impacted growth and achievement, and I think in some cases you can't compare apples to oranges. Those 3 different groups of kids. So I'm a big fan of the growth model, and what you will see in every presentation from me, as long as I'm here moving forward, is you will see the correlation between these kids when they were in 3rd grade and then when they were 4th and then when in the 5th group. I will track the cohorts for you. So you'll see that much more clearly in year 2. Yeah. But again, we've been asked to kind of make this a reset year, count this data for what it is. This is the new baseline, and react accordingly in the classrooms, and then you'll start to build your foundational base up with data again.
That makes sense.
I apologize, I have to.
It's okay. Any other thoughts on the elementary school? So when we get to the middle school, Interestingly enough, in that same subject area, you're gonna see some high percentages in the exceeding and meeting, so that's a positive number, 6th grade, 7th grade particularly, with solid percentages of students in this exceeding and meeting, well above the state in the meeting. And again, as they tease out the data by name, when you see a +20, if you're looking at the 6th grade ELA, when you see a +20 and then only a +1, I celebrate the 21, I celebrate that total percentage, right? And then I say, let's find out how close those 53% of the is to getting to that next level. So again, identify those kids by name and by skill set, and many of them might be 2, 3, 4 questions away. So what you don't want to see year over year when you compare your cohort is you don't want to see the big percentages, the exceedings and meetings shift down. You almost want to see that number stay or go bigger and watch kids bump achievement levels. 67% student growth during a pandemic is a lot to celebrate. During a pandemic, that's 67%. We are 17 percentage points above the state. That's a massive growth. And similarly in 7th grade, 61%. So kudos to teachers teaching 6th grade, 7th grade, and I'm gonna say 8th grade in there because 48% is right on the cusp. That's hard work. You're teaching middle school kids in general is hard work. There's a lot of reasons for those kids to not be engaged, from a chemical balance standpoint alone. And and so I've corralled those kids for a lot of years. So to say that we can get kids focused, engaged, and demonstrating legitimate growth in a real way is important for me to say out loud that that's really good work from the English Language Arts Department at the middle school there. That does not mean we don't look at that 9% who aren't meeting or that 4% or that 11%. We will. We know who they are now. We're collecting that data, and we're either doing it through interventions or through instructional practices in the classroom. But really, that's a nice highlight moment on this particular report to look at. Not the same report in math, and they're the exact same kids. Okay? Exact same kids. Not the same report. A real struggle here. So I haven't had enough time since the data's come out to dig deeply, but I will tell you that the small hole that I've dug, we have adopted illustrative math. That is one of the top programs in the country. It is connected directly, it is engaging, and it is a applied math program. And they have had decent professional development in it, and I'm gonna work with content leaders and find out, do they need more professional development in that program to support them knowing that this was the first year of implementation with that math program. And I don't like using this language, but it's research-based. You will often see an implementation dip. It happens in almost every industry. So this could be COVID, this could be implementation dip. It is that we also, and I don't know what you learned during the adoption phase about what we did with illustrative math. We have 2 pathways for illustrative math. One is the high achieve pathway, which takes you to algebra for all, and the other does not take you there. We chose algebra for all. That is the right way to do it. We should be challenging kids. We should be pushing them forward. And the state is recommending an algebra for all model. However, when you do that to children, it's going to have an impact for a little while. So you're taking a whole group of kids, 6th, 7th, 8th graders, and putting them into a new program with new instructional methods, with higher expectations. During the end of a pandemic, there's a lot of moving parts here. If this sits like this for year 2, 3, 4, clearly an issue. But good or bad, this is the baseline. And that's where we are on that. And interestingly, 7th grade student growth is right on the cusp. While we were not impressive with 66% of our kids in 7th grade partially and not meeting, almost 50% growth means that group of kids actually went up.
Yeah.
So that's why I don't like to look at just achievement data, right? Important to point out that you could be struggling, really improve, and still be struggling a little bit. It just takes time. It takes time to get them there. So we're going to watch that a lot. We're going to meet with teachers to find out what they need. Do we need more professional development, or do we simply know that illustrative is the right program and we have to dig in with the kids by name? 8th grade, 75% in that partially and not meeting. So you're looking at 76%, 66%, 75%. Those are really, really troubling percentages. So we need to dig into that and really, really address the students' math needs. Science, 8th grade, really proud of the science numbers again. That's a good percentage. The test gets harder in 8th grade, and remember that they only take it in 5th and then 8th and then 9th. So there is something to be said from a research standpoint around the consistency of standardized testing, right? They get used to it, they get into a pattern in a certain subject area. The other struggle is it's all science areas, when by the time they hit 10th grade, we just pick bio, right? So the 5th grade test and the 8th grade test, all 6 domains of science. And then all of a sudden they come up to the high school and they're just, here you go, just focus right here for me. And then we teach that subject all year. So let's put it all into perspective. So that, you know, I would argue that the 5th grade and the 8th grade test at an age-appropriate level is harder than the biology test for our students. I think that teases out pretty clearly there. So I think overall that's positive data. So a lot of positive data in English language arts and science, and some work to do in math. So I'll kind of pause and let you guys comment on the middle school if you'd like.
Can I ask a question at the header, at the very beginning? It says RMS has been identified as having a low participation rate.
Yeah, so
Can you say more about
we had a high they tie participation rate to attendance rates. So the middle school attendance across the board last year, not just during the test period, but in general was low compared to the states.
So that was just a day where kids were out?
So believe it or not, no, we had 95 to 100% participation in the test, but we had low, that correlates to your,
I think is it the accountability?
yeah, the accountability data is drawn from your overall attendance for the school year.
Jeez.
Yeah, which is unfortunate that they connect those dots.
Why? Why do they connect those
I
dots?
cannot,
That doesn't make any
I
sense.
cannot answer that question.
Federal.
Yeah, is it federal? Yeah. Yeah. Yeah, it could be tied to money, it could be tied to the reality that there's a belief that, you know, well, it's factual that student attendance equals performance to some extent. So just because everybody showed up on the test day, if your numbers are down in math, I mean, we know that there's a lot of other reasons, right? But to answer the question through this lens, if your numbers are down here, they could say that, you know, a high percentage of your kids were not in attendance. I think it's 20 days, I believe is the cut line where they consider that an offensive level, so.
And my other question was, are you hearing from, like, let's say when you, and maybe going through the data, this is all part of that process, but like, are you hearing from, for example, the 9th grade math teachers that, whoa, these kids were not ready for Algebra 1 or
So,
whatever?
not only are we not necessarily hearing that, when you look at the high school numbers, it's a totally different story, right?
Right.
Now, to be fair, if you ask that question in 2 years, when these are our current freshmen.
So these 8th graders
Are now freshmen. So
freshmen.
so that has not been the case, but remember, we've spent a lot of time in not just in Rockport, but across the Commonwealth, talking about meeting kids where they are. So giving pre-assessments, going back to find out what kids know and are able to do early. So we're not just rolling the ball out and playing the same game. We're not just turning the page and starting our class the way we started it last year. So we've been told to change your curriculum up and to change your entry point up based on the needs of kids. So what we probably are hearing is, I have to start differently. I have to go back and do a front load unit. I have some kids that need this level of support, pre-taught, and other kids that don't need it pre-taught, which is just a good instructional strategy. But ultimately, what you are seeing is they're all getting to the end in a similar fashion than they were pre-COVID and during COVID, at least at the high school level. So we haven't really heard anecdotally yet that, you know, current high school kids are behind their peers from 3 or 4 years ago. But the jury's out until we see this group of 6th, 7th, 8th graders, to be fair. I think that's an impacted group.
It is with, you know, going back to kind of what you were saying with the math.
Yep.
You know, sort of math.
Yep.
If you're doing algebra for the younger middle school,
Mm-hmm.
Especially as you said, the first year or two at least, there's a big gap between
Yes.
what they're not learning their current grade level standards and what that algebra path is teaching you kind of a year or a half year ahead.
Right.
So there's definitely a gap there,
Right.
right? So it's gonna, now, like you said, that doesn't mean that's necessarily a bad thing for the whole child, because eventually, when they get up to high school, they're gonna be more ready and more ready for that algebra path. So I guess I just wanna kind of reiterate that it's hard to see the number now,
Mm-hmm.
but you really have to wait until you see how that's
Mhm.
gonna progress up until definitely 8th grade, but even past 8th grade too, for the.
So think about our current 7th graders. Our current 7th graders had illustrative as 6th graders. They were the first group to get it. They were the first group to get this accelerated model. So they will be properly prepped for the 8th grade class. Their peers 1 grade ahead and 2 grades ahead were sort of piecemeal prepped, right?
But yet they
That's what
would have not
happens in
been.
transition.
But at the same time, you say that, they're gonna be prepped for they took the 6th grade test last year.
Right.
They're current 7th graders.
Right,
They're on the algebra track, so an 8th grade
Right.
test is where they're gonna be tested on what they're learning this year.
Correct.
So that
Correct.
should see a carryover. But at the
Correct.
same time, the flip side of that argument is that in their current 7th grade class, there might be a dip again because of that gap in their current standards,
Mhm.
what they're being taught compared to what they're gonna not be testing on until 8th grade.
so
If
what
that
you,
makes sense to you.
so what you're gonna
That's
see,
you're right.
we're gonna get to an MCAS analysis protocol in a few minutes, and what you're gonna see when we talk about that is the item analysis piece. So the teachers do an item analysis that comes out of the state. That's really an important practice. So they're gonna look at every item by question and by topic. And so what that should tell them is, okay, even though illustrative is asking us to teach these concepts, we know from last year's kids that these particular concepts got missed. Ooh, they're not in this, we have to supplement. Right? That, science
Yeah.
teachers do it all the time, but now we need to do that with math because of the accelerated math program.
And that's really where that curriculum
Yep,
mapping comes out.
yep, yep. It all ties together, the 3 or 4 major pieces of work that we're trying to do in the next year or two.
And then that
But
ties
it's
even
gonna
more,
take time.
because then professional development, not only do you need the curriculum mapping, but you
Yep.
need the professional development, because then with that IM program, that's such a time
Mhm.
involved book in a program,
Mhm.
that then how do you supplement?
Mhm.
So if you're already struggling to get enough time to finish that program,
Mhm.
then you gotta find time
Mhm.
to supplement it, and that comes down to
Yep.
more PD time, I think,
Yep.
is a big part.
And we're looking at scheduling models at the middle school, how robustly are we using our win block, that's that what I need block. So we have to leverage time in the school day to be able to say, some kids need to have extension work because they're high flyers. Other kids are struggling in this area, we need to support them during that win block. It's not a pull-out from the math class, it's a supplemental model. So that block exists, and we have to have conversation with how we're using that time wisely as well. So when you jump to the high school, you're gonna see 69, 70% exceeding the meeting, only 3% not meeting, and out of 64 kids, clearly we're gonna identify kids who are struggling. In 10th grade math, 0 kids in that not meeting category. So just so that you know that, right, you all remember that high school cut line is partially and up. Right? So when we talk about 2 things. We talk about making sure we have high achievement and growth, but we also do talk about the baseline. We want to make sure that kids are getting the correct number on the exam, good or bad, to get out of high school, right? So that's never going to be a concern, in my opinion, here. What we need to be doing is really pushing the envelope to the upper level kids and get above 69%. We want to see that number and exceeding and meeting above 80% across the board in both of those subject areas. And in science, you have almost a 50-50 split there. You have a few more kids not meeting it. It's interesting, science. I have to dig in a little bit more into what the biology looks like, and to what extent that 13% not meeting, even though I hate to say it's only 45 kids, so that's a small group of kids, but that's still a high percentage when you use percentages. So I want to make sure we understand who those kids are and why they're slipping in bio. But overall, the high school's comparatively doing well, and I think that meeting and exceeding number needs to go up. We're really targeting 80%, particularly at the middle school and the high school, as our goal. So this is a screenshot of the data analysis protocol. So every single report that DESI's put out, we have pulled specific reports, we have identified the reports we truly care about, and this is a protocol that the content leaders and I met with. So the principals and I held curriculum team meetings. I showed you that new structure a couple weeks ago, or a few meetings back, where we now have SCC, the Secondary Curriculum Council, and ECC, the Elementary Curriculum Council. So we met with the curriculum leaders last week. We went through the protocol. They have always done data analysis in this district, but this is just a much stricter protocol. Every single teacher, every single grade level, every single subject uses the same protocol. So our outcomes will be clearly defined by the end of the protocol, and they go through all of the data, and this all becomes shared in the drive, and it will inform teachers' practice. And the very last section of the protocol says action steps and person responsible. So the teams decide, hey, as a result of what we just did, we believe we need to do A, B, C, and D, and here's who's going to do them. So I respect the need to be able to come back to you next year with evidence on how we've tried to improve in areas that we need to improve in, what worked and what didn't, right? So from an accountability standpoint internally, this will drive that conversation, and we'll have a check and balance. We'll go back to departments and say, hey, this is what we said we were going to do and why. And we'll be able to check on that work throughout the school year and hope that the results come in year 2 and year 3, now that we've set a new baseline for MCAS.
So Mark, just functionally, all the teachers are filling out this common protocol sheet, but how does it roll up?
So it's as a team. So
Okay,
for
as a
example,
team.
the science team will come together, that content leader is the one taking the notes, and it's a kind of focus group driven conversation. So let's all look at the review of the summary reports, then let's all look at the school results by achievement, and they'll take however long it takes, 10 minutes, 15, 20 on each bullet area or more. And that team will put together a summary. So we will get a data analysis protocol completed by each content team in each school. And then that will inform us. And then that's all shared information. So we'll be able to pull all of that together. And so theoretically, we could pull the 3 to 12 science team together and say, here are areas of strength, here are areas of weakness, here's what we say we're gonna do. And now the content leaders and the administrators can have a little check and balance throughout the school year to make sure that works out. It's not a shift. The concept of data analysis is not a shift in this district. I think systemically framing it is what I think will make us stronger.
Yeah.
If that makes sense.
Well, I really like the idea of coming back to us. I think we're used to having presentations about the gathering of data and the crunching of data, but until it becomes information in terms of policy or action items, that's the part I think that we often feel like we don't get that connecting thread, and maybe it's happening, but hearing about it would actually close the loop for us.
So that kind of ties to this last slide. So we have been talking a lot at the teacher level and leadership level about this culture of progress monitoring that is important to all of us to make sure we have a full picture of the whole child. So you've heard me say this before, MCAS is one of many data sets that we use to do this work. But the way I frame this work is we need a healthy dose of local, and then state, and then nationally normed data sets. So MCAS is our state. We have a lot of local. We have Galileo now, ELA 3 through 12. We use math K through algebra 2. And we have had science in 5th, I believe 5th and 8th grade, but this will be the first year. Now that we're taking a systemic approach, this will be the first year that science will be 5 through 8, all the way through the first year, and then biology as well. So Galileo is an adaptive, nationally normed piece.
Right.
There's a pre, a mid, and a post, and that will allow us to get some good data. It does take time to give assessments, and I know there's always a conversation about how much time are we giving assessments versus how much time are we teaching. And so I'm very conscious of that, but I do believe that unless you have that picture and you have that information, then you're not as well informed as you should be to make instructional decisions for students by name. The other piece of this, it's really early on for Rockport to have this conversation, but I'm starting it so that we know where we want to go, is we need to connect the data for these 3 levels of assessment. So for example, if a kid is struggling in Galileo and is in needs improvement in MCAS and is a straight A student, somehow that's problematic. So when we talk about rigor publicly, when we talk about supporting students and pushing students, all of your data needs to connect. So I've clearly not done that analysis this early in the game, but that's a long-term push that we've already talked about as a leadership team, that when you look at local, state, and national norms, you have to see the whole picture of the child. Every kid, every student, every human being can have a bad day.
Right.
Yeah, on the court, on the stage, and in academia. But in totality, you should be able to get enough data to frame a picture of who the child is as a student. We also have a lot of subject-specific formative and summative assessments built into our program or homegrown. And then at the high school, we have PSATs, SATs, ACT, and AP exams. So we are not hurting in the world of education for data. We're often hurting for systemic practices in analyzing it, and then to your point, actionable steps with positive outcomes. So my hope is that I can come back in a similar presentation, maybe with better graphics, that will show you the outcomes that were generated after a year of doing this work. So that's what I have for you. Okay.
Can I go back to the testing you were just talking about?
Yes.
With the bid and
Yep.
the post?
Yep.
Because I brought this up before, in a meeting, I believe, last year. And as you just said, we're not hurting for data on the test. I almost wonder if there's some testing fatigue happening amongst the students with so much testing, because not only are you doing Galileo, like you said, you're doing subject matter, but then even things like iReady, which aren't up there, for iReady to get the students get their path for iReady, there's a benchmark test for that. And that's, for a lot of kids, like a 2-day math class type of thing, or more to do that. So, you know, it's like 9 Galileo days between when you add up the different subjects, plus 9+ days of testing, plus iReady testing, plus any other testing they're doing for their reading or whatnot. That's a lot of testing. So I do think there is a thing as testing fatigue among students, and where that happens or what time of year, I don't really know. I have to research on that. I wonder if there's a carryover into MCAS though from that. But I guess I'm also wondering, the Galileo, like I don't know how many questions, how long it takes students to complete those tests. And I wonder if there's a way to still gather the information by more targeted questions possibly, to make the test shorter so it's not such a fatigue factor.
That's a lot of
And
questions.
again, I know that goes back.
It's a lot of questions.
It is.
So,
I'm just kind of, I'm running that, I'm speaking that as a.
Generally speaking, thank you, you're right, you took the words right out. Generally speaking, it takes 1 to 2 classes depending on the student and depending on the age bracket. But generally speaking, a class period or 2. You can do what you're suggesting with Galileo and with, so I've used STARS and I've used NWA MAP. There's 3 major companies, probably more than that, but there's 3 major ones that are the players that I'm aware of that are pretty well used in Massachusetts. The beauty of having nationally normed assessments and the curse of having nationally normed assessments is that you have to give them within a prescribed window, usually, and you have to give them to fidelity. Otherwise, your town or your school's data is not validated when you check national norms. So when we want to make sure we're still ahead as a state and ahead as a community, yes, we could go into Galileo and vote certain things off the island and make it shorter and maybe fix or not fix the testing thing. It will invalidate the national norms part of the test, which is, in many of our opinions, the meat and potatoes of the test. So I don't disagree with you. I think there's a balance. I often don't talk about assessment and its instruction separately. I talk about teaching and learning. And if you are really running a good class, there are moments of assessment all the time, and you can explain to kids that, you know, as you're doing iReady, there's moments to learn. Young children are pretty compliant test takers, right? But when you hit that 5th or 6th grade level, they start asking why, and they might start to just not take the test seriously. We have to do a better job in schools of explaining to children, not just their parents, because they're not taking the test, but to the actual students, the importance. If people knew, it helps us place you in different classes the following year. If kids knew, as a result of this, I'll know whether you need help or not and where you're gonna go during wind block. A fifth grader could engage in that conversation, no doubt.
Absolutely.
So we need to do a better job with explaining to children why we're putting them through these tests, as opposed to, oh, it's a Galileo day, which might be what
I think that's a
I would
huge,
say.
I think that's.
That's exactly what I've
That's
heard.
kind of the vibe. That's the vibe.
Yeah.
So that's why we hold these meetings, right? So that's why we do this work. So I believe in using the data wisely. I agree that we could have test fatigue depending who the child is and the type of year and everything. But I think we've come a long way in our profession from not having any data to being independent contractors in classrooms separately who have our own separate data that doesn't relate, to finally, a structured group of professionals working on teams for the good of kids. And in all three of our schools, we have opportunities for teachers to come together and talk about kids by name, and that was not always the case in public education. So that time is there, that opportunity is there. They need to talk about the data, not anecdotally about kids. Mark's a good kid, well, that only got me so far.
So then that leads into my second question, if you don't mind. And you mentioned this about the targeted interventions as well.
Yep.
For the students who are on that cusp of achievement levels. So are you looking at, I guess, both students who you mentioned being 1, 2, 3 questions away from going up an achievement level, but at the flip side, the ones who you don't want to slip down as well?
If this child is a solid, exceeding or a solid meets, then that doesn't mean we're not challenging.
Right.
It just means that, we feel like we're in good shape there. But to your point, there's a couple of kids that need to be supported just to move up a notch, and there's some that, wow, they got through that by the skin of the teeth, and we really need to make sure, because remember, the curriculum's harder now.
Right.
Last year's curriculum was easier than this year's curriculum. So if the kid just made it in 5th grade, why would we foolishly think they'll just make it again in 6th grade without some attention, right? Everything just got harder. So yes, we're looking at both. Yeah. And I can't tell you what the typical prescription will be until I've seen all of the analysis. Yeah.
I have a question.
Mhm.
Why biology? Why did we choose that subject? I know that we're moving to bio and physics, but why did we choose, I'm just wondering the process on that.
Yeah, I have to give you a careful answer. It's a high stakes test that is connected to graduation.
Yes.
It's important that kids graduate from high school.
Yes.
Can I leave it at that?
Yeah.
Okay.
So it was the state that said we had to do bio.
I believe we have options. We even have options in what grade you take that test. Some high schools give it in 10th grade, some
Okay.
give it in 9th grade. But my short answer is we want all kids to get,
Be able to graduate.
yes,
Yeah.
yes.
That's an opportunity.
yes.
Can't argue that one.
Anything else on MCAS, Mr. Chair?
I have another one. I can keep going.
That's what I'm afraid of. Go ahead.
Along with you've talked a lot about professional development.
Mhm.
And one thing, being a teacher, that often I feel like I'm doing is reinventing the wheel. And I'm wondering about finding like school districts in the area, or just even nearby districts, comparing our data to their data, seeing if we can have some collaboration with those districts for best practices.
Mhm.
And I feel like that's not an easy thing logistically to arrange. It's very difficult
Mhm.
with different schedules, different contracts,
Mhm.
But that idea of best practices, I think, is a really important idea. So we can find and we can use ideas that other teachers are using, and not have to spend year after year trying to find things that work.
So I do know that this district has done it with small study groups who have traveled out, because that's easier than doing big partnerships because of our conflicting schedules from district to district. So for example, as we start to look at engineering and science programming at the high school, we can target specific high schools in Massachusetts that we know are doing something special or unique. yes, we'll look at their data, we won't necessarily compare theirs to ours, it's more important to me that they have high achieving outcomes.
Right.
And then we send a small team out to find out what they're doing well, and we do a couple things, we look at instructional practices, so that hopefully you can get into classrooms and observe. You find out what the resources they have are, and ultimately what the structure of their course offerings look like.
Right.
So we started those conversations, I know this district has done that in some capacity, but it's really tied to your curriculum review and adoption cycle sometimes too. So when we start talking about ELA at the elementary school, that will be a heavy component. We will reach out to 10, 15, 20 identified districts based on their levels of success. And we'll look at curate, and we'll look at ed reports and all the different pieces of information that we have at our disposal to figure out what the right mix
Right.
is. In a perfect world, I would love to see local districts get together and not vote on their school committee calendar in March or April, before superintendents could talk to each other and say, how cool would it be if 3 districts within 20 minutes of each other or half an hour agreed to all of the same early release days? Like, my God, the unbelievable local learning experiences you could have there would be unbelievable, right? But we don't ever do it that way. We have the gift of election days every now and then, where most schools who have elections in their schools will shut down for election day. So in my experience, I've leveraged election days before. So I've hosted multi-district PDs in my past positions on an election day, because I knew 5 towns were closed on that day. But that takes a year to plan that work.
I think there has to be some really creative ways to try to make it happen.
Yeah.
So, like you mentioned, having the group go to a district
Yeah.
maybe during an
Yeah.
early release
Yeah.
day, or
We have 3 of them.
or
Yeah.
or after school
Yeah.
time somehow allowed. But I think finding those creative ways to make those collaborations happen, I think would be
Yeah.
so beneficial to everybody.
Is there maybe a way it could happen online, so we don't have to shut down so much?
It has started to happen online a lot.
Like
There's
after school
a
and
lot,
things like that.
there's a lot of asynchronous teacher work happening.
Yeah.
In many cases, teachers are unbelievable. They do it on their own. They find job alikes, they get into user groups, everything from Twitters to online accounts to do
Yeah.
PD. I think if districts, so yes, it's happening all the time with great teachers. I think if we can structure it as districts, that would be pretty powerful. Yeah.
Good discussion. Finance update, because we moved our meeting, June had a conflict with her professional group. She does have an update for us, so for our next meeting, I know
Yep.
information has been building, has been processing, but we'll start to get those regular updates that we were so interested in, so that's great. Which leads us to school committee discussion. Are there any walk-on items or points that anyone wanted to make? Been fairly active tonight.
Josh just took mine, by the way. He took it in about an hour ago. I wanted to just talk about the concert, like it was just, so next time I'm gonna tell you what I'm gonna talk about. It was unbelievable. And it was unbelievable to see young kids and the older kids, to see a clinician from the Boston Children's Chorus come in and do that work. To see it thematic was very powerful. And to see that the theme of that night tied to the work that the district is doing around equity and around a sense of belonging, I couldn't have asked for that to happen in a more lucky happenstance way. So it was a really, really nice event overall. Yeah.
Go ahead.
Yeah, I was just gonna say, we are so lucky to have some of the visiting staff that we get in
Mhm.
Rockport,
Mhm.
whether it's through the Shaylin Moo, whether it's through connections from Mr. Cohen. It's just
It's true,
amazing,
yeah.
the quality of people that come in here to spend the week with our kids.
I really liked how Josh, when you were speaking with your update, a lot of that was about all these positive things that are happening in the district.
Yeah.
And I kind of like that idea of every meeting having like a time to just speak about all the positive things that are happening, hearing about the art and science, hearing about the concert and the
Yeah,
math teacher
it's-
joining, like those kind of things are things that I don't think we hear enough about, because they happen so often, but at so many different levels that, we all get a little bit siloed into where either our students are or where our
Well,
kids
I-
are, or what we're just hearing,
Right.
socially. So I love the idea of speaking from each school about the positive things that are happening.
Yeah.
Every meeting, I would love to hear that.
Well, last night's concert, I mean, I try and videotape them, but usually the person with the whitest head in Rockport manages to sit in front of me. But I know someone was professionally videoing it, but
Yeah.
it would be wonderful to see, you know, obviously we get family and family members coming to see the kids, but it's something that for an hour and a half, the greater community who
Mhm.
doesn't have kids in the system but who help support the school system, it'd be wonderful to share that, if not in person, at least online, because it really is kind of chilling when you see the younger children singing. Their voices are just so
Yeah.
beautiful, and the older kids as well. They just get a little deeper in timbre and a little fuller in range, but it would be great to share that beyond this room as well.
And there is I know there's a music department YouTube channel,
There
but I think
is.
it's a matter
Yeah.
of getting someone there
Yeah.
to do the
Yeah.
videotape and things,
Yeah.
but looking further into that would be something to.
They used to have a cable, remember the cables channel that would show like local things? I don't know, is cable?
So he's here.
There you go.
So we- yeah, so I-
1623, I guess you've morphed
Yes.
into 1623
Yes.
now.
My understanding is they're always looking for local content, so we can,
There you go.
I think we could
Yeah,
probably.
this is my first gig, so.
They would-
You're like, no
The voice
offense.
behind the camera has
No.
spoken.
Yeah.
I did attend the PTO meeting
Oh, good.
last week. There was a
Thank you.
pretty good attendance. I
Oh,
would say there
nice.
were probably 20 people there. Amy Rose, Amy Waterman, and Jody
Wow.
Goodhue were all there, representing the elementary and the middle school, and the high school, sorry. And so they talked about the holiday fair, which is a huge fundraiser, the biggest fundraiser for the PTO. They talked about some of the opportunities for enrichment, and that they're sort of encouraging the middle school and the high school to give them things that they want to do for enrichment. Sometimes it's easier at the elementary level to sort of come up, because there's the different field trips that they always do and different sort of people coming in to the schools, and they just talked about how they would like to spend the money that they make in the past. Maybe the PTO hasn't always spent it right away, but they want to have money coming in and then money going out to the schools. So it was just a good sort of kickoff to the year, and something that's good to get involved in. And I went as a parent, but also just to sort of say, I'm on the school committee, and I'll give a sort of brief report out at the meeting, and they had a good turnout, which is good. And we run a little different because our PTO is district-wide,
Right.
so we don't have the elementary PTO, the middle, and the high school. And so it can kind of wax and wane as to how many people are, attending or helping, but it seemed to be a really good turnout, and look forward to some good things, and funding some good things, so.
Mainly elementary parents or
It was a
little nice
mix.
mix?
It was a mix, I would say, probably more elementary parents now, but there were probably 5 or 6 high school parents
Oh,
there.
nice.
The other group we should probably celebrate in addition to the PTO is the Ed Foundation of Rockport. I know, Mark, you were
So
at a
I- yeah,
meeting this.
So I attended their meeting tonight. Healthy endowment, it's very impressive how hard this group works and how dedicated they are to supporting the school district. So thank you to that group of individuals. And we already have 3 or 4 proposals coming from teachers in the district, and they discussed those tonight. And so I will, at the next meeting, once everything's official, I'll
Right.
probably come to you with some kind of more formal update on how they're supporting us and which programs we were looking for. So everything from the Washington DC field trip to the Italy trip, to a chorus clinician. There were quite a few things on the docket that the district was asking for, and it's all teachers. It's all teachers doing good work to figure out what the best way to support our kids are. And so a very, very impressive first meeting. It's my first time sitting through a full meeting, and really dedicated group of people. So proud to be part of that organization, to have them supporting us. Yeah.
And they've made really incredible progress in their endowments.
Yes.
It's surprising to see
Yeah.
the financials and the
Yeah.
generosity
Yeah.
of people who are independently contributing to that. Okay, well, that will move us, since we don't have a finance report tonight, but we will at our next meeting, included school committee discussion. We do have a need for executive session tonight, which means that would be the point that when I make the motion, we'll exit from executive session rather than regular session. So that would mean that the the public has to leave the meeting because it's for the
I didn't
protection.
hear you.
Oh, I'm sorry. We're about to go into executive session.
Our lack of microphones,
Gotcha.
we had them, there we go.